This is our annual event for Holocaust Memorial Day, and I'd like to start with a prayer. We have gathered here today, impelled by visions of the harmony of all people. We are children of many traditions, inheritors of shared wisdom and tragic misunderstandings, of proud hopes and humble successes. Now, it is time for us to meet in memory and truth, in courage and trust, in love and promise. In that which we share, let us see the common prayer of humanity. In that which we differ, let us wonder at the freedom of people. In our unity and our differences, let us know the uniqueness that is our spirit. May our courage match our convictions, and our integrity match our hope. May our faith bring us closer to each other. May our meeting with past and present bring blessing for the future. And I'd like to invite Councillor Andrew Johnson, the chair of Harlow Council.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Harlow Council's Civic Chamber, the heart of democracy in our town. We gather here tonight in solemn remembrance of the 6 million Jewish men, women and children murdered in the Holocaust, and of the others who were persecuted and killed by the Nazi regime and its collaborators because of who they were, be they Roma, disabled, political opponents, prisoners of war, or many more. Holocaust Memorial Day is not only about memory, although memory is sacred, it is about conscience. It asks each generation not simply to look back in horror, but to look inward with honesty and outward with integrity and responsibility. It challenges us to recognise where prejudice begins, where language hardens, where people are reduced to labels, and where indifference allows cruelty to grow. Tonight in a council chamber, a place of democratic debate, of public service, and of community leadership, that challenge carries particular weight for us. The Holocaust did not begin with camps and gas chambers. It began with words and exclusions, with the quiet normalisation of hatred, and with institutions that failed to defend the dignity of every human being. Tonight, we show both our solidarity with the Jewish community and with all those communities who carry the trauma of genocide in living memory. And I think particularly tonight about the Uyghur people under continued persecution in China, and of the Yazidi brutally murdered by ISIS. Tonight we reaffirm a simple but profound truth, that every human life has equal worth, and that defence of that truth is not someone else's job. Thank you for all being here to remember, to reflect, and to recommit yourselves to the values of humanity, justice, and compassion.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Each year, Holocaust Memorial Day is shaped by a specific theme that guides how we remember, reflect, and learn. At the heart of these commemorations, the Holocaust Memorial Trust tells us, are the voices of survivors and testimonies from individuals who were murdered in the Holocaust or in recent genocides. Their first-hand accounts deepen our emotional connection to the tragedy in a way no textbook ever could. They move us, challenge us, and most importantly, stand as a powerful defense against the denial and distortion of history. However, fewer and fewer witnesses are still alive, and we now risk losing the understanding of the depth of suffering, and with it, the urgency to confront hatred, bigotry, and discrimination. This year's theme, Bridging Generations, is a call to action and a reminder that the responsibility of remembrance does not end with the survivors. It lives on through their children, their grandchildren, and through all of us. We are encouraged to build a bridge between memory and action, between history and hope for the future. As a second-generation Holocaust survivor, I try to talk to young people about the horrors my family experienced. But the reality of what has happened is blurred, often even questioned. When I bring objects with me that can be seen, touched, and handled, it helps people relate to the events I am retelling. Today, we have given our speakers some objects to look at and research, and their voices will amplify the horrors that had happened. All of us sitting here today will be the bridge between past generations of survivors and the present generation of those who preserve the memories and connect them to the present. Our 6 candles are lit this evening by 6 people who remind us of those who've died and those who carry the memories forward, our responsibility to remember. Memorial Trust produced a series of videos called 80 Objects, 80 Lives. We are going to hear about some of them today. So I'd like to invite Councillor Dan Swords to be the first reader.
Brother Heinz Martin Buber.
And where were you born?
In Nuremberg,
When?
23rd of February 1924. This is the Kiddish Cup Becher presented to me on my bar mitzvah in Nuremberg in 1928. This was made by a silversmith who was in the family. All our things were made by that silversmith.
When a young person comes of age in the Jewish faith, it is marked not just by celebration, but by love and belonging. It is a moment when family and community come together to say, you matter, you belong, and you carry something forward. Often that moment is marked with an object, something small, but filled with meaning. The Kiddush cup is one such object. It is used to bless wine, a simple part of everyday life for thousands of years. Through that blessing, ordinary time becomes sacred. Passed from parent to child, generation to generation, the cup carries memory, faith and identity. It speaks of family tables, shared moments and continuity, of traditions lived quietly, week by week. The Holocaust shattered this chain. Families were torn apart, communities destroyed, and the passing down of traditions and treasured objects violently interrupted. Survivors lost not only loved ones, but the customs that once shaped their daily lives. For those who were young, or survived by hiding who they were, tradition itself could become something painful or something to be left behind. This loss was not accidental. Genocide seeks not only to kill people, but to erase who they are, to strip away language, culture, memory and pride. Objects like this cup remind us of what was targeted: ordinary lives, ordinary rituals, and the right to belong without fear. Henry Ruger was one of the fortunate few who escaped on Kindertransport. The survival of this Kiddush cup alongside him is deeply significant. It represents not only what was almost lost, but what endured. It holds the possibility of being passed on again, not as a museum piece alone, but as a living link between generations. In that sense, the cup is also a quiet act of defiance. It says that despite everything that was done to break families and silence traditions, something remains. It says that survival is not only about staying alive, but about carrying meaning forward, even when the weight of the past is heavy. This is one of the lasting harms of genocide, the attempt to turn identity into a source of shame. What once gave people belonging was made dangerous. What once brought pride was used to justify hatred. Our responsibility is to undo that harm. We must help people reconnect with their history, their culture, and their traditions. We must teach young people not only about loss and suffering, but about life, about who people were before hatred tried to define them, and who they still have the right to be. By remembering the importance of symbols like this Kiddush cup, we honour resilience as well as remembrance, and we help ensure that identity, once targeted for destruction, can once again be a source of dignity, continuity and hope.
I'd like to invite Chris Vince, our Member of Parliament, to speak about the menorah.
My name is Sarah Sonia Giffen, and I was born in Harlow, 27th of January 1943. I was a hidden child in Amsterdam during the war.
Apparently, neighbours told my mother on her way past, she was crying, that there were things buried in the garden, that some of my grandparents' things were buried in the garden. So my father went at night with some of his cronies from the Dutch resistance and dug up the garden, and this is all they found. That was all that was there. Yeah, I know that it's very old, probably being used for generations by my family.
When I thought about what I wanted to say about Sarah's story, I was sitting at home and I looked up and I've got like this corner cabinet, and on the corner cabinet there are 5 home pride men. One of them's like a salt shaker, one of them's a pepper shaker, the other one you put flour in. And I don't have them there because I'm a big fan of home pride or flour or anything like that. I've got them there because whenever I used to go and see my granddad as a child, he had them on his mantelpiece. So when he passed away about 10, 11 years ago now, I wanted to keep them and have them in my house as a constant memory of him. And actually, as I walk around my house, I've got a lot of that. I've got a painting that my late uncle painted. I've got photos of my granddad playing football for Malden Town Football Club back in the 40s and 50s. Because those images, but also those possessions, to be able to touch them, to be able to see them, makes me be able to think about my grandparents and the memories that I treasure to have had with them. The menorah is a 7-branch candelium symbolising God's eternal presence and guidance. It's an image which is deeply intertwined with the Jewish tradition, with the original menorah being crafted from pure gold and held in the holiest of holy temples in Jerusalem. And after that temple was sadly destroyed, it was then taken to Rome. But this menorah, the menorah that Sarah talks about, is more than even that. It's a memory of her grandparents. It's a memory of her family, a memory of a family and memories that could have been, that were so cruelly taken away by what happened in the Holocaust. And I think that's something that we should really reflect on. Last week in Parliament, we had a lady called Harlow who came to talk to us about her experiences in the Holocaust. Her and her brother were the only survivors of her family to survive the Holocaust. She lost her father, she lost her mother, and she lost her sister in the Holocaust. But she also lost those memories of them as well, because her memories of her father was her father being taken away by SS soldiers and put on a train. Her memories of her mother were her being dragged away and never to see them again. And she lost so much because of what the terrible events of the Holocaust. When we talk about the Holocaust, we rightly remember the 6 million Jewish people that lost their lives, who were murdered by the Nazis. But it's important we remember that we lost so much more as well. But what the menorah symbolises to me is hope of a better future, that actually the Jewish people survived and have thrived, and people like Sarah have continued in their lives, and I think we must remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite Helen to talk to us about her refugee cookbook.
My name is Michael Heckler. I was born in Breslau, which is the German name of a town that's now called Wrocław. And I was born in 1st of April, 1937. I found this book among the papers collected by my parents. They kept everything. It is called translated means, how should I cook in England? And it's a German publication from 1938, and I believe it was given to the students at the cookery school where Alice learned for 6 months. And it's got inside it all sorts of little notes, like how to lay a table, how to serve, from which side and who to serve first, and the correct etiquette and protocol for serving.
When I first learned about this refugee cookbook, something in me connected to it. Immediately, in Ghana, we always say, "Efia ufimunu enetre widiane," meaning the food you eat tells the story of the home you came from. And truly, food is one of the strongest ways we carry our identity. Growing up, I watched my mom cook with a kind of quiet wisdom. She never measured anything, not once. She would just say, "Helen, look well. The food will tell you when it's ready." And she was right. In our culture, recipes are not written. They are lived. They are passed down through hands, through memory, and through love. So when I look at the refugee cookbook, I don't just see recipes. I see people who held onto the taste of home when home was slipping away. I see mothers, fathers, aunties, uncles, just like mine, who carried their culture in the only way they could. Through the foods, they remembered even when everything else had been taken. For Holocaust survivors and refugees, these recipes were not simply meals. They were reminders of who they were before persecution. They were a way to keep family alive in memory, even when family could not be kept alive in body. They were a quiet act of resistance, a way of saying, my identity will not be erased. And as someone from a culture where food is storytelling, I understand that deeply. I think of my mother teaching me how to make light soup, telling me stories of her own mother as she stirred the pot. I think of how those stories shaped me, how they connected me to people I never met. That is what food does. It bridges generations. This year's theme, Bridging Generations, reminds us that memory is not just something we keep. It is something we pass on. The Refugee Cookbook is a bridge from past to present, from loss to survival, from silence to testimony. It invites us to listen to the stories behind the ingredients, the journeys behind the dishes, and the courage behind every page. Today, as we honor Holocaust Memorial Day, may we remember that even in the darkest times, people found ways to hold onto their humanity, sometimes through a prayer, sometimes through a song, and sometimes through a simple recipe that carried the taste of home. May we honor the memories of those who were lost and stand with those who survived. May we learn from every culture, every story, every tradition that teaches us the value of compassion and dignity. May we be people who build bridges between generations, between communities, and between hearts. And may the stories preserved in this cookbook inspire us to protect one another, to cherish our differences, and to create a world where every life is valued. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Reverend Darren McKindo to talk to us about some World War I medals.
Tell me first your name.
Rudy Lever.
What was your name at birth?
Rudy Leibowitz. We changed our name in 1956 or thereabouts.
Did you have a Hebrew name?
Refoil ben Tzvi. My father was called Tzvi ben Refoil. Tzvi means a deer, D-E-E-R, but he was also D-E-A-R.
And where were you born?
I was born in Berlin, Germany.
And when?
When 31st of May 1926, my father was a doctor in the First World War. On the left is the Iron Cross, second class, which he won for some kind of bravery, which he never talked about. The medal on the right is a medal that everybody who fought in the war got for merely having fought. My father's name is Hans Leibowitz, doctor. The medals were awarded in Berlin, where he then lived.
Rudolf Lever emigrated from Nazi Germany to the UK in 1937. We learned from the video that he was born as Rudi Lebrovich in Berlin in May 1926. What we don't know is why his name was changed. That's a mystery that we will never fully understand. But we also discovered that he had a Jewish name, something that would have been important to him and to his family. A small fact, but a fact that was an essential part of his identity. The object that we've been shown, or the objects that were shown, are also a part of the family identity. We can imagine that when they fled from Nazi Germany, they were only able to take a few things with them. And in the midst of their traumatic journey, a journey that was to challenge and to change their sense of national identity, they carried with them 2 medals, one of which was awarded for bravery, awarded by the state, awarded to a hero, somebody that in a civic event, maybe in a location like this, would have been given to mark the appreciation of a society and a nation. How could it be that only 15 years later, that same individual was forced to flee as an enemy of the state? We're reminded that so easily the irrational fear and prejudice of a nation can twist people's beliefs. Individuals fed distorted views of the Jewish people led to a whole people, a whole segment of society being dehumanized, being alienated from their own state, and then eventually eventually deeper and deeper forms of persecution taking place, as it started with just an opinion and a view. And so when we hear about this family, one of many families, on the one hand celebrated, and then 15 years later having to flee, we're reminded of the cry that goes out in our generation, never again. But we need to recognise the forces that shape our own opinions of others. Our family, our community and our culture, even our sense of nation. These are all things that can shape us for good or can leave us with irrational prejudices. The medals that form part of Rudy's story remind us that the best defence against such blind bias is to truly listen to the stories of the individuals around us. For when we identify with the individual, when we listen with curiosity, it is difficult to be prejudiced against somebody that we are truly seeking to understand. To be open to hear who the person is through their stories is to show them dignity and respect, is to value them for their humanity and for their contribution to society. And sometimes that's difficult. As a third order Franciscan, I'm reminded of the example of St. Francis, who looked out at individuals, and the people that he found it most difficult to come alongside were the people he would spend more time with, because he recognised that each individual life was inherently important. So we move from two medals, important to an individual, to being reminded that each of us are individuals worthy of being listened to, worthy of being respected.
I'd now like to invite Leslie Bennett to tell us about the Shanghai residence certificate.
Can you please tell us your name and where you were born?
My name is now Kurt Wick. It used to be Kurt Wickelholz in Vienna, and I was born on the 26th of October 1937. This photograph has got a residence certificate in my name. You have to carry that about with you all the time. And if you didn't have it, you had to get immediately another one. They wanted to know who you were.
When I first watched this short film of Kurt speaking, the first thing that struck me was the change of his family name, Wickelholz to Wick. An anglicisation that many Jewish emigres adopted or had thrust upon them when entering another country, either as a way of disguising their roots or as an adaptation to the language of the host country. My assumption was that the family had changed their name in Shanghai, but then I saw his identity card, issued when he was 7 years old, still carrying the family name of Wickelholz. So I did a little bit of research. Kurt was born in Vienna in 1937, and in March 1938, Hitler annexed Austria. In the following weeks, a tide of violence against Jews swept the country as Nazi policies were enacted. The Wickerholz family eventually managed to cross the frontier into Italy and in Trieste boarded a ship bound for Shanghai on August the 2nd, 1939. The boat arrived at its destination on the 28th of that month, 3 days before Hitler invaded Poland, triggering the start of World War II. They were among the last Jewish families to make it to Shanghai. Why did they go to Shanghai? Sigmund, Kurt's older brother, recalled years later, "We went there by default because the rest of the world was closed to us." The rest of the world was closed to us. I wonder how many people still say that today. In Shanghai, they found a small Jewish community of approximately 20,000, mainly from Germany and Austria. Baby Kurt spent his childhood here, and at 7 years old, he has an identity card written in a language he may or may not have been able to understand. Still with his German family name, indicating his difference, but needing always to carry the card because, as he says, they wanted to know who you were. For those who have fled and survived violence, the threat of they can be ever present. They who have the power to humiliate, control, define your identity, and ultimately annihilate. However uneasy it was for them, Shanghai provided safety for the family through the war years. They came to Britain in 1948 and at some time changed their name to Wick. Kurt died in Mill Hill last year, aged 87. A Viennese Jewish baby who survived because not all doors were closed to him. We're going to have a break now from testimonies, and we're going to ask Raised Roof to perform their first piece called Threads.
In 1933, Stalin had, Shema, listen, by Primo Levi. You who live secure in your comfortable homes, who return each evening to find warm food and a hearty welcome, consider, is this a man who slogs through mud, who's never known peace, who fights for scraps of bread, who lives at another man's whim, who at his yes or no lies dead? Consider, is this a woman shorn, bold, and bereft of a name because she lacks the strength to remember, her eyes as void and her womb as frigid as a winter frog's? Consider that such horrors have indeed been, Engrave them in your hearts when you lounge in your beds, and again when you rise, when you venture outside. Rehearse them to your children. Or may your houses softly crumble and disease render you equally as humble, so that even your offspring avert their eyes.
In 1933, Stalin had manufactured a famine. 7 million people in Ukraine died of starvation.
1945. The Nazi regime in Germany sought the final solution. Over 6 million Jews and nearly 2 million others, including Roma, political opponents, and people with disabilities, were murdered. Further deaths from starvation and disease resulted from their crimes against humanity.
1979, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, overworked, starved and executed 25% of the population of Cambodia.
How many roads must a man walk down before you can call him a man? Yes, and how many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, how many times must the cannibals fly before they're ever back? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. In 1994, over 100 died in Rwanda, Hutu militia carried out a primitive campaign to exterminate the ethnic Tutsi population. 800,000 Tutsis were killed.
1995. With the breakup of Yugoslavia, Bosnian Serbs used forced displacement and rape and ultimately murdered over 200,000 Bosnian Muslims.
2003, in Western Sudan, government militias conduct ongoing campaigns of displacement, rape and slaughter against non-Arab ethnic groups. In Darfur, hundreds of thousands have died.
How many years can a mountain exist before it is washed into the sea? And how many years can some people exist
2020, Chinese Uyghur Muslims are ruthlessly repressed and persecuted with mass internment, beatings, torture and death in ongoing severe human rights abuses.
2023, 70,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are indiscriminately killed by the State of Israel. Up to 90% of the population are displaced.
Can a man look up before he can see the sky? And how many years was one man had before he can hear the people cry? And how many deaths will it take until he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Thank you to Raised Roof. Just like to note that the last statement is a statement of opinion. It's not fact. None of these facts
Actually,
have been
it is.
verified.
It's a Holocaust memorial, remember?
Been verified as yet. I'm now going to ask Neela Hibbert to talk to us about Marcel's album.
My name is Marcel Amstel. I was born in Nowy Sącz, which is a small town in the southern part of Galicia, Poland, and we survived the war by being deported to Siberia and Uzbekistan, and we came to England in 1946. My parents didn't make it in 1948. This little thing, which handmade, it's been cut from a large book, and which I made myself with cotton wool, and this is, you know, over 70 years old. And the paper, you can see how it's aged. It says, belonged to Marcel Amstel. What belongs? Belonged to my first bit of English writing. This goes back to 1945, just before the war finished, and I took it with me from Russia, Poland, to, and then I've got children's comments here in memory from Russia, from Poland, and from my school in England. It's very, very important to me.
Marcel's album reminds me of my childhood, and when I brought things here when I was from home, and I see things and I look into these papers and realize how valuable each and every one of our backgrounds are, our ancestors are. And we mustn't forget that the stories that we hear, and we must respect one another. And what actually happened is deeply disturbing for me, because today in Harlow, we stand together across generations to remind lives taken, families shattered, and the world forever changed. We remember 6 million Jewish lives lost and millions of others who have been targeted by hatred, silence, and differences. But remembrance is not only about the past, it is promise to the future. Survivors pass their stories to children, grandchildren, and communities. And memory becomes responsibility. The responsibility to listen, to teach, and to challenge hatred wherever it appears. To ensure the denial, distortion, and prejudice never find home in our silence. By bringing generations and different faiths together, we make clear the remembrance does not fade, but it grows stronger. That humanity must always come before fear. That never again is not just a phrase, but is a promise to carry forward. Here in Harlow, we stand together united because united we stand and divided we fall. May we honor the past by shaping most just compassionate and united future. And when we listen to these stories, it reminds us that we mustn't be silent. Never. Please, we need to listen and carry these forwards, our thoughts. Never be ashamed to come forward and say, things are wrong, we need to put things right. Thank you.
Our seventh object is a burnt prayer book, and I'm going to ask Michal to say a few words about it.
Can you please tell me your name?
Hans Danziger. Hans Wolfgang Danziger.
And where were you born and when?
I was born in Berlin in November 1930. These are leaves from prayer book, which were found by my father up in this courtyard of the synagogue, possibly around Straße after Kristallnacht. And as you can see, they're singed and burnt and are flying about, and he picked them up. And luckily I found them in his effects, and I've had them put in a box frame so they stay safe and don't deteriorate any further.
Words are important in the Jewish tradition, as well as many other traditions. A prayer book is always taken great care of, not dropped, not put on the ground, let alone burned or torn. These pages that we show must have contained the name of God, the holy name that Jewish people never say aloud. The prayer book has been desecrated, as were so many other Jewish artifacts during the Holocaust. Desecrated artifacts is one way that conquerors attempt to show those they conquer that they are worthless, as well as their religion and traditions. The Holocaust was an extreme case of genocide, when the Nazis attempted to erase Jewish people, their culture, and their world. The scale of this genocide was enormous, but similar things happened even when scales of killing and destruction were not as large. The effects are similar and devastation equally traumatic. Religious artifacts are of extreme importance to their owners, and so are the religious texts within them. All religions have their own sacred texts, and the destruction of a book feels like a harm being done to one's religion, and thus poses a threat to our own faith. We know from history that one of the first things that happen when people or nations attempt to dominate another, and it is through destruction of written materials, books, as well as other items. Without books, conquerors hope that the defeated nations will be easier to subjugate to their own wills. And we also know that one of the first acts of resistance is through publications of written materials, pamphlets, newsletters, and later books. must preserve books as a record of what has gone before us and as a hope for the future.
I'd like to invite Samira now to talk about a German passport marked with a J.
What is the name?
Walter Cohen,
And where were you born?
27th of October 1923.
And where were you born?
Vienna. This is the first page of my parents' passport. The red J was a forerunner of the yellow star, which is meaningless, but it should be humiliating and so on. And there's also the addition that every Jewish male had to have Israel as a first name, and every Jewish female Sarah. Both these photos were taken at the same time as mine, and that was at the earliest opportunity to get passport photos after the fall of Austria. Mother looks rather sad.
Frantz Fanon, the colonial theorist, in his seminal book Black Skins, White Masks, uses the expression, the Jew, my brother in misfortune, to indicate the shared experience of oppression by the Jewish people under anti-Semitism and black people under colonialism. But he says, and I quote, the Jewishness of the Jew can go unnoticed. He is a white man and he can pass undetected. But the Nazis were determined to ensure that the Jews were indeed noticed, identified, and discriminated against at every juncture. When we listened to the interview that you just heard, you saw that this gentleman, Walter Kamerlek, talked about how the first page of his parents' Viennese passport was marked by a large letter J to ensure that their identities as Jews were clear. This was done to better facilitate the persecution of the Jews, to better execute discriminatory policies and restrict the movement of the Jewish people. But it didn't end there. There was also the mandatory implementation of middle names, Israel and Sarah, for Jewish individuals to further enable identification. Also a form of homogenization of the other. Profound and cruel acts of othering have plagued humanity to the present day. I'm a Baha'i originally from Iran, and I'm sure you know what's happening in Iran today. As Baha'is, we're no strangers to othering. It's very interesting, though. Astronauts, people who are privileged to view the Earth from above the planet, are often struck by an immense sense of clarity and shift of perspective called the overview effect. Looking at the Earth from space, they do not see borders of countries or territories. All they see is one Earth. Ron Garan, an astronaut who recently returned to Earth after spending 178 days in space, said, and I quote, "We're not going to have peace on Earth until we recognize the basic fact of the
interrelated structure of all reality. And when we can evolve beyond a two-dimensional us versus them mindset and embrace the true multi-dimensional reality of the universe that we live in, that's when we're going to no longer be floating in darkness. I am a Baha'i. And as a Baha'i, we ardently believe that the earth is one country, mankind its citizens. Thank you. Our next item is a Seder plate, and I'd like to invite Councillor David Carter to talk about it.
Lieselotte Kastner, formerly Adler, and I'm always called Liesel because Lieselotte is quite a mouthful, at any rate for people in Britain.
Okay, when were you born?
On the 16th of July, 1934.
Where were you born?
In Vienna. This is the Seder dish that belonged to my great-grandfather, Simon Hacker, and it's a very treasured piece that we really enjoy every Seder, every year, and I believe that it was kept by somebody in Erlach, and that my uncle in Sweden, he got it after the war, he must have managed to rescue it, and my father asked whether it could come to us, and it is treasured and handed down in my generation, then from generation to generation. It came from Vienna here, so it's gone quite a lot of places. As I said, it's, we love it.
Before I start my reading, I'd like to just give you an insight into what a Seder plate is. As you've seen there, it contains six symbolic areas, which each carry a symbolic food, and these go back hundreds of years. The foods are eaten or displayed at the service of Passover. The plate itself, as I say, goes back generations, and it's a very, very treasured thing in the Jewish community. Seder means order in Hebrew, and a Seder plate represents the order of Passover meal celebrated each year on the first night of Passover. The Seder plate was handed down the generations in the Lieselotte's family, and we hope it will continue to be used for many more years. When people face troubles, they can't always take their belongings with them. Often people bury their treasures hoping to retrieve them when times are better. This is what happened to Lieselotte's family. Sadly, the objects hidden by the family had mostly disappeared, stolen by the time Lieselotte's father came to find them. But at least one treasure remained, the Seder plate. At the time of a genocide, many objects disappear, and the younger generation could lose sight of their traditions because they might have no objects to which they can relate. It is important to encourage people to look for objects that are part of history. Museums are good for this sort of thing, as are community centres and religious centres, all of which house many artefacts that can be used as a way of remembering a lost culture. Genocide is an attempt to end a people and its culture. We, the generations here today, must not allow this to happen. We must stand together and perhaps form a new order, one in which all of us can be free to be who we are and to celebrate our past and bring it into our present. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Lorraine Kirk from the Harlow Jewish community to speak about the Yellow Star.
If you can tell me first your name. Yes, it's Fanny Bogdanoff. And do you have any other names? No other names, no. Do you have a Hebrew name? No, no. And where were you born? In Düsseldorf, in the Rhineland, in Germany, on the 20th of July 1927. This is the Star of David, which all Jewish people had to wear as from November 1939. My mother had to wear this on the outside of her coat before she was taken to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. The word in the middle of the Star of David are Jude, meaning Jew.
The idea of a Jewish badge dates back almost more than 1,000 years to medieval times. And in fact, if you see ancient Jewish history items, you'll often see Jews in Britain and other parts of Europe wearing a special sort of hat. By the 14th century, the idea of a Jewish badge began to disappear, and it had really largely gone by the time of the 18th century, the French Revolution, until the Nazis began to reintroduce it. They started thinking about it quite early on, and they introduced the idea of what was normally a yellow star with the word Jude, meaning Jew, in the middle. Sometimes it had a different word depending on the language of the country in question. But the Nazis began to reintroduce it in a more systematic way. So it came into Poland in 1939, in Russia in 1941, and eventually the whole of the Third Reich. And children over the age of 6 were required to wear that yellow star on their outer clothing. It also spread to countries such as Belgium and France. There were a few exceptions, such as Denmark, parts of Hungary, and parts of Romania. We all know about the Yellow Star. If we read anything about the Holocaust, hear reminiscences, study anything. But thinking about it, I think it almost goes to the back of our mind. It's not necessarily something that we focus on. And so I think now is a very valuable time just to spend a minute thinking about the implications of it and thinking about how low a society has to shrink, that it requires a group of people, a group of its own citizens, to wear such a symbol. And our final object is a Kindertransport number tag, and I'm going to ask James to speak about it.
Can you tell your name?
Otto Fred Hatter
And where were you born?
in Vienna, at home at 3 William Wongasse,
And when were you born?
on the 29th of February 1924. So I'm only just 23. Number tag issued to Otto Hatter on the registration for Kindertransport 4th December 1938. 360 children were registered that day. I keep it in the Shemot, in my, I'll show you it in my, the book Exodus, right? Shemot. I keep it inside there.
Good evening. I'm going to speak about a small piece of card, a number tag. Otto was given that number when he boarded the Kindertransport, the train that would take him from danger to England and to safety. He was one of around 10,000 Jewish children who survived that way. He was lucky. Many were not. The Nazis did what they so often did. They took away a person's name, replaced it with a number. A name tells a story. A number erases it. For Otto, the number became his name, and so it is deeply fitting that he keeps this tag in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, in Hebrew, Shemot, which means names. When you strip away a name, you strip away a face, a voice, a history. You make someone anonymous, unseen in a crowd, uncounted as a person. Even as some children were allowed to flee, the system that marked them tried to make them into objects, not human beings. But the children who reached the UK found more than safety. They found welcome. They found foster families, people who supported them, and in many cases loved them. They went to school. They learned. They grew. They rebuilt their lives. In time, they reclaimed what had been taken, their voice, their story, their names. Too many who flee to safer shores arrive with almost nothing. Some carry no papers. Some do not even know their exact date of birth. What they do carry is one thing that holds their past, their people, their hope, their name. This is what genocide tries to destroy. Not only bodies, but memory. Not only homes, but names.
I'd like to invite Raised Roof for their second performance, which is called Remember Me.
Remember me.
Keep digging!
That looks about 20 foot to me.
20 feet? That's deep enough. Lie down. I said lie down. Bring the others.
You lot, hurry up. Over there.
Close off. I said close off. Down a bit. Down a bit. Lie down. I said lie down. Bring the others.
Come here.
Hurry up, you lot.
Go here.
Keep going.
Come on.
Keep going. Keep moving.
Come here to me.
Keep moving.
Guys off.
Come on, you two. Hurry up this way. Over there.
Guys off. That's it, guys off. Down a bit. Down a bit. Lie down. I said lie down. I'm fine.
This should not have happened. We are better than that.
don't have a representative from the Islamic Center with us at the moment, so I've chosen to read some words from the Muslim tradition. I hope that this meets with the needs of Muslims. Don't know if we have any here who can comment on this. O Allah, forgive our living and our dead, those who are with us and those who are absent, our young and our old, our menfolk and our womenfolk. O Allah, whomever you give life from among us, give them life in Islam, and whomever you take away from us, take them away in faith. O Allah, do not forbid us their reward, and do not send us astray after them. Inni lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Verily we belong to God, and verily to Him do we return. May Allah envelop your loved ones in mercy and forgiveness. Amen. May Allah grant ease to the hearts of the family and friends who grieve the loss of the loved ones. Amen. May Allah reunite us with our loved ones in Jannah. Amen.
Eternal God, source of love and life. We lament today for the loss of the 6 million Jews who were killed in the Holocaust, the millions of other victims of Nazi persecution, and victims of all genocides. So easily we have been swayed to deny the dignity of others, to forget their individual worth, and to extinguish their freedom. So easily we have been blind to the uprising of injustice and prejudice, leading to violent beliefs and actions against peoples who are targeted simply because of their identity. Help us to respect and value the differences we each bring to the world, recognizing the richness of diversity that we bring. In the light of God, all are equally precious manifestations of the divine, with vast potential that we should nurture and celebrate. For our prayers and actions, help us raise up those who suffer, protect the vulnerable, and see the life of each individual reach their potential under God. Amen.
Through the blessing, grace, and guidance, through the power of the light and the streams from you, may all the negative karma, destructive emotions, and obscurations and blockage be purified and removed. May I know myself forgive all the harm I may have thought and done. May I accomplish the profound practice of power and breathe good and peaceful death. And through the triumph of my death, may I be able to benefit all the others being living or dead. This is a prayer for the dying, and because of the remembrance, this is the only prayer we have in Buddhist religion.
If you're able to, please rise. שנהרגו ונשרפו ונחנקו, שנקברו חיים, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, שמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר Amen. And I'd like to end with a Kaddish, the mourner's prayer. This is a prayer of hope, and you have the translation in front of you. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה ברכו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל בני אדם, ואמרו amen. May the Most High, source of perfect peace, grant peace to us and to all people of the world. And let us say amen. Thank you. There are refreshments if you care to join us.
Advertise this, advertise.